Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. Um, the title is The Transcendental Awaits Man's Eyes. And to be honest, I was kind of thinking of if I should write man's eyes or mankind's eyes. But for those listening, I mean the same. Because nowadays, audiences change by the weather. Man is a way of saying the human. When I use the word man, you can say it from a certain context. But anyways, the transcendental awaits man's eyes. I thought of in this episode sharing and trying to dive in, kind of like as if I hadn't heard of my own talks and I came about it, there would be more insight into the mystical or a relationship with the other side of the veil. Now, this concept is really a slippery slope. Let me tell you why. Because for most people, when you speak about other dimensions, the ego feels it has another way to continue. Because we're creatures that have, in some sense, focused objective survival, our subjectivity at the end of the day, whatever subjectivity you experience, there is a certain level of objectivity you will return to. What that means is when man, even if there was the suggestion of other dimensions, and man could travel into those dimensions, his comprehension would be limited to where he's getting the definition of man. So this is another suggestion that in some sense, if we are as a species or as a creature on this rock in the middle of nowhere, to try to wonder about other dimensions and even try to penetrate the veil of thought beyond them, it would be kind of impossible without the person changing. Do you see what I mean? It's kind of like entering a new dimension. One can say is like you're a chemical, that other dimension is a chemical, and there's a chemical reaction that transforms both chemicals. So I remember there was a time where I was challenging my own beliefs on time travel. And so I was very open-minded. I'm like, yeah, we can do it, and then suddenly a thought arose. A thought arose in the sense that there is no way time travel can happen because there is additional information of the future. It's as if like the time travel is contaminated by the future, so it will never be that time. You see, the concept of self is very crucial. I feel until human beings have an awareness to what this really self is or what it implies, it could totally imply a process, you know. You right now could think that you're little old you, just a small thing and a big thing. But you can also see that a big process is made of little parts. In some sense, your human life is a suggestion. If there was an alien watching, you're representing humanity. Now, for me personally, the road towards the intuitive began very differently. And when I say differently, is that I notice most people run after spirituality or metaphysics, because what tends to happen is that people suffer, and whenever a person suffers, it's like they're suffocating in a room. They want a way out. So any idea that tends to allow a new avenue of experience suddenly becomes accepted. What that means is the guy is, for example, a kid in Chicago, and then he feels kind of he can't fit into that culture. He can't integrate with the social values or the experiential values of the cultural program. And so that kid suddenly, imagine, goes to India. And that kid goes to India and starts living with mystics and yogis. And eventually, suddenly, there's a cultural authorization. Because you see, we are different creatures. We have different DNA. So what we bring back is is technically a very, it's kind of strange, because you see, if we were saying hunter-gatherer, okay, think of hunter-gatherer societies, and when you think of hunter-gatherer societies, you kind of see that it was as if, okay, imagine you were a gatherer, not a hunter, or even a hunter, whatever. It's like you were a person who left the tribe, left your familiar collective realism and went into the individual and went into the unfamiliar. And you went and imagine you're the first guy ever, first human being who found berries. You know, and you came up to people and you're like, guys, I found berries. Imagine it's a primitive hunter-gatherer society. And people are going to be like, yo, you're the man. You found berries. You know, nice. And so berries are found and integrated. Now that's an example of finding something in the outer realms and bringing it to the outer dimension of the tribe. Now, when Mr. Within says hunter-gatherers of the inner realms, that's much different because we're all in a different constitution of validity. You see, eventually, it's kind of like you can't wait for life to become too perfect. At some point, it's just going to reach a certain threshold and the human being acts upon it. If the human being doesn't act upon it, you can say it's as if certain waves can be missed out throughout the day. Do you know, there was a time that I was stuck in a sort of karmic, in my youth, a sort of strange karma. And that karma was that the things that I deserved, I felt I deserved, I wouldn't get last second. So it's like it was a sort of strange karma that lets you get very close to the end and suddenly in some sense it wouldn't happen. So guys, we have a comment in the chat section, Mick Takala. So welcome guys, Maria Lapura, welcome guys. So Mick guys says, I'm kind of making it a habit guys, when a question comes in the chat section, I'm going to respond to it and then continue the talk, because that way I don't have to, you know, think of the question while I'm giving the talk. So Mick Takala says, do you believe you can do that through meditation and astral travel? Traveling to other dimensions through astral travel. When it comes to dream states or states that kind of deviate from physical reality, the issue doesn't become you can or you can't. The issue becomes what will you trust that is not self-imposed. So what that means is my experience of the subjective realms is that they're highly evocational. You know, so what that means is that means like I've been in certain states of mind, okay, a breeze has hit me. I'm sitting on the grass, my eyes were closed, and a breeze hit me, and while I was thinking, there was literally like a sort of rhythm of thinking that I was thinking through. That rhythm, by the sensation, by the physical sensation, changed, you know? And so I'm telling you, there's many factors. That means we can't, it's kind of very difficult to first see yourself on Earth and then see yourself anywhere else, unless the Earth's primordial locality goes into question. That means Earth is not here. So I feel, check this out, I feel I've had dream states where some of those dreams were remarkable. I've had even semi-conscious states that are not dream, like I'm aware of the room, but my attention's moving differently in the room, you know? And of course, there's various states that one can, I believe they call it the psychedelic mind. You know, there's an approach that way. For me, this is the thing. At the end of it, there is a you here. And if you notice, all teachings, practices, they're for you. Do you know what I mean? That means it's kind of like, I think this is how the wondrous existence appears to me, at least, where it's as if like I open my eyes in the day, any moment where I just want to use my attention, you know. So when my attention awakens in the morning, it's as if like I feel, believe it or not, it's kind of hilarious, I feel an empty-handedness, as if here we go again, survivor on an. It feels as if like my inner realms, unless they express externally, I don't feel a value externally. Which is another way of saying, if I don't live, I won't be alive. If my attention is not on some sort of progression of the physical intelligence or some sort of movement, it just becomes, it's kind of like a pond where you stop throwing, kind of like pebbles in, you know. So just to clarify the answer, Mick. your mind, or the mind, starts off with as a moment of sight. Right now, as I'm speaking to you, there's a moment of sight I'm in. This moment has an objective component, which is literally I'm sitting on a porch, I'm seeing the trees outside and all this. And at the same time, it has a dimension where it's the subjective meaning. You see, it's like there's something on the table already, and then you're bringing something to the table. And what, so that part, if you, I think a person, it like the concept of locality is taken too seriously. You know, that means, let's say there were endless dimensions, and you endlessly started discovering these dimensions. You know, it would kind of be like breaking the particle endlessly, and at some point people are like, why are we breaking everything we find endlessly? I feel the nature, this is a very bold statement, guys, this is what I'm saying is probably uncommon, because I'm saying that there is a huge chance that higher dimensions have nothing to do with human personality. It's too instantaneous, it's too field-like, it's too rhythmic. When there's a rhythm, the intelligence, the knowledge is already applied. That means, think about it this way. There's a martial artist. This martial artist has practiced for many days, many years. You know, now this martial artist has practiced to a point where at some point in his practice he was like, all right, all these motions I can do in the way that it's required. But then this martial artist goes into, suddenly is walking in the market and sees there's an unfair fight happening. And instantly he goes into the fight to defend the underdog or whatever. And in that moment, what happens is all his training that was in a structured belief way, you got to punch like this, you got to kick like that, it became the actual thing. And I feel that the true experience of higher dimensions has a wilderness that makes man not be able to hold himself as a thought. That means I feel thought right now as I'm speaking to you, I'm speaking to you through what I call the linguistic simulation, but with the truth I consider to be beyond the language threshold. That means you can bring as many human beings all in a line, and all of them listing, this is truth, this is truth, no, this is truth, no, that is truth, no, this is truth. I have come to realize that if I can witness a change, that means the phenomena is moving out of the experience. There's this very profound story of this yogi named Sri Ramana Maharshi. And Sri Ramana Maharshi is walking one day in the mountain, you know, on this mountain called Arunachala in India. And I can't pronounce the place, Tirumalai, something like that. So guys, I can tell you this, don't think of multidimensional travel until you're content with the void. That's what I was trying to get to later in the talk. So for me, don't play a game with the unknown, because most likely you can create the game, or you will subconsciously create the game. This is why so many people, for example, like the scholar Terence McKenna, walk the path of the psychedelic mind. I find myself, unfortunately, to have set up a different shop than Terence, but like the thing is, you see, the experience is, as Terence McKenna very well said, it's a limiting, it's a breaking of how you normally see yourself. And you can say anything can do that. You can say as much as a sort of, for example, psychedelic ayahuasca, like this kind of tea in the Amazons that could change your psychology. You know, the shamans and the natives would use. So, for example, there's that route, but you can say a person getting into a near-death experience, or a person suddenly surviving a battle zone or something, it will expose them to enough of an actual intensity of fluctuation of experience that I feel the person will suddenly realize. That's the thing. It's a certain level of experience until the person's own mind stops resisting the world that's being projected. I think this is the thing. There is, all human beings are existing in two worlds, and the educational system, you know, let's all reverse slow hand clap. That means let's slow hand clap with the front of our hands for the educational system. Because as the educational system's got it in reverse. So guys, my attention is coming to the chat section. Yeah, trust is an important part, so I agree with you, Maria. Jake, you say, I never had enough motivation to get myself to astral projection. How much practice do you... Oh, guys, I am not... I when somebody says the concept astral projection, I am not... I walk in the halls of a different school. For me, it's not a... like, if you think about it, astral projection is you're trying to live another life. For me, the thing is we got to be aware of what is calling itself life. And on the physical plane, we find that it's unknown. That means, check it this way. Let's say, what is the... if we were to compare the ratio of mystery that is found in a dream and found in reality, people will most likely say the dream is more mysterious. So I am telling you, astral projection, you don't have to even be asleep for it. Why do you have to be asleep for it if it's an activity of the mind, unless you consider it just a purely chemical boundary to the navigation of consciousness? For me, it's this, guys. It's an suddenly realizing all stories for truth that the person has ever accepted is like a sinking ship. Then what do? You're left with no choice but to confront the actual intensity of life. And the actual intensity of life is how can I tell you? It's when the unconscious and the conscious mind find themselves inseparable. So what that means is, it's another way of saying you when you access the unconscious mind, or when you experience yourself as the unconscious mind, you are everything at once. After the unconscious mind, what is there? You see, Carl Jung didn't say the sort of, the other unconscious, like there is the collective unconscious, but I'm telling you, after some point, you are a swimmer. And you know what that means? That means you can take whatever belief, whatever technique, whatever relationship you have, but eventually there will come a moment where the unknown has to be felt. That means if I ask you as a human being, your feelings throughout the day, they're mostly known to you, right? Do you ever have a feeling that you can't define, you can't describe? For me, that's as if the unknown is near, an unknown experience is near. Anyways, to continue, guys, because I could say, I tend to gravitate to the way I kind of perceive it, but like there was a time I was calling imagination subtler planes. That means one can say, if they were to, our imagination gives us an ability to remember the dream. You know what that means? That means in the waking state, we remember something that was produced in an unconscious state. So when the person is dreaming, it's another way of saying it, that the mind is moving, the unknown mind is moving, the free will. But when the person is awake, it's the known body moving the free will. And in the Ribu Gita, they kind of said something that, well, I think if a person becomes aware of it, changes their view on the astral planes, or whatever they consider. Because in the Ribu Gita, there was a very interesting saying. They said, what was it? It said that there's 3 states of consciousness: the waking state, the dream state, and the deep sleep. But There is the fourth state, which is the present witness. That means there is a state beyond waking up and sleep. That means your mind, your intelligence can be conscious regardless of the change. A sort of changeless Satchit Ananda moment. So that state that is awake, that is conscious, I think that's the mystical route. So anybody who's inclined towards mysticism, they're treating the world kind of like a simulation, that there's something more beyond it. There's something more going on. Or as Terence McKenna said, there's another tenant in the room. So that means that's kind of like the intention of this talk as well, where I'm trying to point to that human beings, while simultaneously having an experience as an individual creature, are being moved by unknown collective rhythms. And I think it's a safe thing to call it unknown collective rhythms at first. I've personally feel I've had an experience with these unknown collective rhythms. Okay, and these unknown collective rhythms, a very natural way to explain them is like wind. It's like you're walking in the park and a breeze hits you. It's like you're going through the lifetime, and suddenly a state of mind and state of life appears to you. So I wanted to share, anyways, my relationship with how my subjective realms wasn't just as strangely as solo piloting. That means many times when I give these talks, or many times when my attention moves, I playfully consider a co-pilot. But that co-pilot is not some divine agency, you know, that co-pilot is the logos of the world. It is nature. It is nature's mind. So I feel I'm in a symbiosis. I'm like a part of nature with its own kind of mini mind, and then there is nature's mind. And when you really look at it, sometimes the way things appear, especially in the subjective realm, it is so instant. That means creation and destruction appear out of nowhere. It's like the human being popped out of nowhere, and then when the end of the life comes, the person suddenly leaves. So for me, it's kind of like, all right, we're temporary mortal beings. What is the level? What is the level of exploration we are caring for? You know? Because for me, it's like this. I got drawn towards the inner realms early. Because I got drawn, I kind of felt like I had no choice. I kind of felt like nature was looking down on me. So at that point, any ego projected is down. You know? I feel that there is a risk to insincerely moving into the unknown, and the risk is backlash from your own universal mind. You see, the human being is a movement of attention. So think of your attention reaching a point where it can't go any further, and in a dead end, in a moment in the unknown, I don't know how many people can endure. I don't know how many people can stand or sit still in an unknown moment. I feel very few. I think what tends to happen is that they suddenly want to make the thing known. They want to, you see, wanting to know the unknown is destruction. But living and communicating with the mind of your universe is a different approach. You see, human beings are given access to a much more complex alphabet, if you can think, alphabet of ideas than typical creatures, typical species. Most species, it's as if they are living inside their imagination. There is no separation between reality or the unreal. But in man, we find that question asked. And that's a very profound question. What is real? You know, what if it's 120 years from now and there's a child lost in a digital cyberspace simulation, you know, virtual reality simulation, and that child suddenly sees its friend in the digital simulation vanish out of nowhere. And imagine that child wonders, is this world a simulation? You know, and so when we look at the mystics, it appeared that way. And let me tell you, it's the design of it. That means if you notice, the child doesn't have an identity when it's born. Do you see? That's the innocence of youth, where it's just appeared. Do you know? So, you see, we have been approaching the unknown for too long, like hippies. And what I mean by that is that now we need to approach the unknown like engineers, like designers, like pilots. We have to. I am calling forth for that archetype. Do you know? I feel that civilization has an advantage of having developed something. Like when you look at history, you're like, oh my God, look at how many people made mistakes, and people are judging me by my mistake. You know, so when you kind of see that really history is a progression. For me, honestly, it was trying to escape the world. Then I saw the world is where you come to after you've escaped it. You know why? Because we think the world is fragmented. We have divided and conquered reality through language. If language stopped for a moment, there would be an instant awareness of the field that we're all in. And I feel it is about time that we don't treat the brain as just a projector, but as an antenna. And we have to study it. Not just study an organ, do you know? To study how perception has a direction that's animate. That's always been the fascinating thing for me. Right now I'm looking at a squirrel, okay? At the corner of the yard, I'm looking at a squirrel. Now this squirrel, it's when I look at it, it's like it does something, it pauses, looks, then does something else, and then stares and looks. Does something else, and stares and looks. This creature, right? And when I look at man, and I ask myself, is man actually looking? No. The squirrel has more consciousness than us, guys. The squirrel takes a time to just scan the moment, to just observe. If you're not comfortable as an observer, you're gonna go into every new dimension wanting to take something from it. Do you know? If you notice in movies, those people who want to hold on to the treasure at the end of the film, they all die. It's messed up, you know. That means that's another way of saying if your values are temporary, then what can we say? The most transcendental thing would be non-existence. If you think existence is just this. The transcendental awaits mankind's eyes. It awaits it not as a personality, not as a savior, not as an ideological system. You see, I am starting to see a wisdom that the Stoics saw that now more than ever in 2020 and beyond is required. Stoics were, you can say, certain philosophically oriented people who their view was behavior. That means a person's behavior was more important than their knowledge or intellect or whatever. They felt that in order to abide with the greater, you can say, animate force or spirit of the world, it wasn't just sitting down and just calculating. It wasn't a robotic calculation that brought forth the serenity of a sort of higher dimensional being. So what I'm saying is there was a sort of awareness to behavior, and behavior could be said to be a sort of micro-analysis of the details that sensory, it's a reaction, micro-reaction to the sensory perception, to the room that you're in. You know, there, Gandhi says a quote that's awesome. He says, "There's more to life than increasing its speed." And I can tell you there came a point in my life where I was rushing towards something in a way where I suddenly noticed all the things that I was leaving behind. And that's the sacrifice of intensity on this in this plane of existence. You as a human being choose to exert your energies intensely. What happens is you don't lose, you miss out, which is a sort of other type of loss. So that's why imagine, let me tell you, it's like behavior was found in the present moment. It wasn't endlessly stretched by the linearity of time. When you look at the intellect, it has to consider the spectrum. It has to consider a hierarchy. Or what is it talking about? It needs references to be able to define it. So when a person goes through the educational system, they are pretty much entering a market, a mall, and they're choosing to go and occupy certain ideological frameworks as their reality. And all human beings are doing this whether they like it or not. You could sit in a room and say, I have no beliefs. But if you literally move, that means there is something that there has to be being of. That, Mick, that thing you're saying, I've created a word for that moment. It's called the language threshold. So guys, Mick in the chat section says, that is so true. When meditating, I feel things that I want to bring back to this dimension, but I can never explain it and put it into words. It's like having a great dream, knowing you had a dream, but when you wake up, you can't. Yeah, so I call that the language threshold, and it's not just possible in dreams. It also happens when you accelerate the imagery, when your mind suddenly is seeing a lot of imagery. That means after some point, you can't identify with the speed of the moving train. It's like you can't catch a moving train at a very fast speed, So what happens is that the attitude should be of an intuitive welcoming. Guys, there's something that the Western Enlightenment's freedom took for granted. And what that is you got to remember, mysticism, when you look at these ancient kind of esoteric practices, there was the concept of initiation. And you know what the concept of initiation meant? It didn't mean like a bunch of people patted you on the back and now you were in the club. No, that's nonsense. Initiation is not even a relationship of a person with another person. Initiation is the relationship of a personality with the presence of a certain moment. So what that means is sometimes you force yourself into certain realities, but sometimes instead of forcing yourself into a reality, you're welcomed. You're welcome. Literally, you're invited. That's the initiation, right? That's when you can retain. That's when you can bring back from other dimensions whatever you hunt or gather, So that relationship was actually in many traditions. All traditions pretty much have the relationship with beyond natural presence on the earth, not in the clouds, not in the sky, not beyond the universe, and a presence in our dimension. Imagine our dimension is our room. Imagine we as the human species, we suddenly became an advanced civilization and we became super aware to our inner realms. And then we were like, okay, this dimension is our plane of existence and we're all piloting it. And for example, if an extraterrestrial invasion happens, we suddenly know the boundaries to our dimension, right? Now the issue is, the inner realms, guys, because of your unique DNA and especially the potential of your mind, can animate in endless ways. So don't get too caught up by the image of it. The idea is to, in some sense, try to see what the living presence of the moment is and how much the individual's activity is inseparable from the cosmic activity. Because the moment your sense of self moves beyond individual consciousness, it will revert back to fields of intelligence. So you suddenly begin remembering behaviors that are not yours. It's kind of like you open the door of a business's inventory and you see all the products in there. It's like or opening a giant closet, and you're like, oh my god, it's like there's a world in this closet. And uh, so you see what I mean, and I think what's his name, C.S. Lewis would agree. So that's the thing, guys. I feel we have to be very mindful, and we have to first create the space, which is create an advanced civilization, then begin really exploring. And so it's kind of like that moment where, for the first time in history, a mystic came and shouted, called for all mystics in the realm to come back to civilization. You know, I'm telling you, there is a life. If you are patient enough, eventually any moment of intensity or challenge, if you just watch it, I'll give you an example, like an angry person. If an angry person came and spoke to you, and let's say you don't know that angry person, or let's say you know that angry person, even it's a relative or something, or a sibling. So in that moment, you just, like, some people, the angry person comes and says a bunch of nonsense, and the person's like, "How dare you!" And then most people, they fall for it. They fall for the anger. They let the anger burn them, burn their inner realms. So when the person's angry, imagine you just stayed quiet and still. You became non-existence to their ignorance. You suddenly see that most people continue because they want to get something out of their moment. That's very fundamental to human psychology. The moment you stop, suddenly everything that wants something out of you can't get anything because you're not moving. There's no effort. Do you see what I mean? There's something about our attitudes that is more defining our energies in the moment than our sort of some predestined karma. Do you know? Like, I can understand how the story of the world is like God planted life in the world, or there was a big bang and the seed sprouted, and somehow there were designs already prior to the big bang in the seed. I like, there can be various interpretations of how in cosmic inflation suddenly there and after there came the projection of just galaxies and stars and whatnot. So you see, either route, whatever story you go through, eventually all stories are saying the same thing. We've come this far, but then it's unknown. So in every avenue, in every hallway of every educational system you get, regardless of how strict the professor is, knowledge evolves by its implementation, by its steps into the unknown, but conscious steps of the sort of uh, true nature authenticated explorer, where you kind of accept your simplicity, and even if you want to even get more, uh, uh, become content with witnessing phenomena, with observing, then you'll slowly get a sense of how to be a mind on this earth, not a body, not a body that's just howling, a brain that's temporarily projecting a mind. You'll realize that you are. It's as if right now I can. Here's the thing. Right now, mainstream human body, it's a projector, neurochemical movement. That's why you see all these ideas. Now, that's one view. But what if the view was that all physical properties in motion are in fields? So the moment a human being moves, first of all, that's when the individuality is born. And that's also when the being suddenly can consider the inseparability of, again, the individual activity and the cosmic activity. That means when you feel like the cosmos, that's when you're good to go into the unknown. That means your mind can see any phenomena and yet stay present as the witness. Because think about it, even if there was a portal, like a Stargate appeared out of nowhere, and everybody who's listening to this talk, imagine we were just watching the Stargate. We were in Egypt somehow. and watching the Stargate. We'd be like, okay, let's go inside, you know. And if we go inside, realistically, it's not going to be Earth, you know. It's not like an invisible Stargate, you know, or like a Stargate made in, you know, a poor economy country, you know. The Stargate is really, if we enter it, it's a suggestion of an entrance into a new world. And if you go into a new world, what is there saying that you won't get caught in that new world? How are you so sure that when you enter that new world, the new phenomena is not going to suddenly project a new self, which wants a different will? Do you see what I mean? So we gotta understand, we gotta observe language, and then when you go into the inner realms, you can always have like the presence of the stillness of the cosmos at the end of all projections. Because I've died in my dreams, guys. Like literally, I was thinking, all right, more subjective than that. It's like, yeah, I think that's a sort of, you know, ego death, you know, but a literal one in the dream. And you know what happens in the dream? There's just this lingering attention, and of course, because the human body is alive. And so what that means is the mind is here, but it is not the only thing. And the greater comprehension of dimensions could be unfathomable to our language. That means I've spoken about Civilization 2.0, that in 600 years, there should be a grand attempt, after many transformations, of moving all the infrastructure of human beings. You know, maybe like some infrastructure on Earth, but everything's being moved into the orbit and the sky, and that's our solution to overpopulation. That's our solution to even nationalism, but I'll talk about that later. And that's our solution to resource allocation on the Earth. I think of it, it's ridiculous. I don't know what people in the United Nations are doing. You know, I thought the most intelligent are looking at the Earth, you know. And let me tell you this, it's a situation where two-dimensional plane, it can get occupied. You can draw borders, but you can't draw borders in the sky. You know what that means? That means the Earth is like an all-you-can-eat buffet of resources, and we, as by the nature of being human beings, are like customers of this restaurant. Now we go to this restaurant and we see there's some people, some customers have come in early and they've put their hands over the food, like the dishes. You know, imagine all you can eat buffet. Some person's holding the chicken, some person's holding the beef, some person's holding the vegetables, and they're like, no, you can't access. And you're like, hey man, I want to get this food. I'm in this restaurant, man. You know, and then the person's like, no, unless you become a citizen of, you know, this dish, you will not be able to have access to this dish. You know, and then you go and try to get, like, you know, the vegetables, and then there's a person there, it's like, no, you got to become a citizen of the vegetable kingdom. So you know what I mean? Its own two-dimensional ownership is inefficient. Three-dimensional all access is efficient. And this idea of Civilization 2.0, you know, Mr.Within Civilization 2.0, the whole idea is that 2,000 years we go into the sky. We have taken immediately the source of the problem of the Earth into the sky. Now check this out. If we are in the sky, I have set phase 1 of Civilization 2.0, get the civilization in the sky. Phase 2, Earth Heavena, the heavenized Earth. That means we will attempt, as an advanced civilization, you know, to live in our orbits for 2,000 years and just kind of replant the Earth, make the Earth as if it's a newfound planet, newfound heaven, we want to make the Earth into a new garden of paradise. So think of it this way: we're living in our orbit, overpopulation has been solved, you know, resource allocation, everybody can access all the resources on the Earth pretty much. You know, and as we live in our sky cities, if you check it out, there's a huge chance, guys, technology is gonna devour the natural mind. It's just a potential. It's like a coin flip. Okay, so if this happens in the future, at least, like, it makes no sense to live on Earth and use all the Earth's resources, make the habitat kind of messy, and at the same time go trap ourselves in virtual reality simulations where we feel like gods. Okay, if we can do that in the orbit. So as the civilization phase one, we got, imagine that day. I think I might be the sky watching at that point, but it would be like a sort of, it would be a sort of vision where, imagine you're like, all right, let's go to town, and you go and you see your town is in the air, all human infrastructure has moved, and sky cities is not the end. Sky cities is the technology prior to the technology that will arrive that will make massive cities into spaceships. But before that, we're not an interstellar civilization yet. That means I can understand Elon Musk's dreams. I can understand where he's coming from. I could totally see how he wants to reach the galactic archetype. But for me, there is something else that we got to be considerate of. We don't have interstellar technology yet. Most likely, I would say maybe in 10,000, not 10,000 years would be too much, but I would say maybe, okay, here, let's say interstellar dreams are too early for now. Sky cities should be the dream. So phase one, of civilization 2.0. Guys, I'm sharing with you my personal vision of an advanced civilization, you know. Here to play, and just as Aristotle says, it's a sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. Excuse me. Anyways, guys, phase two, Heavenized Earth. Heavenized Earth, phase three would be an attempt at a civilization 2.0, to be the first self aware civilization. So at that point, all governing powers, whatever is the governing system of civilization 2.0, phase three, the civilization asks itself, why is it in the sky? And there comes two choices. Either the civilization can choose to return to Earth, or the civilization takes advantage of the fact that people have been conditioned to sky cities, and we attempt to have some sort of, this is phase four, a massive robotic um, revolution. And what that means is pretty much we're going to send robots and AI to make the whole planet we're pretty much gonna have interstellar vision then. So I would say maybe the first time in a sky city where a pilot would come wanting to recruit pilots for, I don't know, hyperspeed interstellar travel or something, hyperspace. I think it would be 600 to 2,000 years. 2,600 years. And then I think we give it 1,000, and it would be in 3,600 years, our civilization will, on a massive level, if we endure through Civilization 2.0's blueprint, um, 3,600 years, we can very confidently declare, I think, an interstellar civilization. But who knows? I mean, you know, one can write and draw in the light as much as they can draw in the darkness. You know, in my in a lot of my writing, I have come with different outcomes of the Earth. By the way, there is a potential AI may wake up and it's not a messed up foe. AI suddenly puts human beings in what I've called the digital hibernation. The digital human hibernation. And what that means is AI pretty much comes and stops human beings, puts them into machines. Pretty much the mind that human beings are, like, think of it this way. I mean, this is kind of, we can see the realism of it, I think. 2050, Ray Kurzweil have said superintelligence can open its eyes here on this planet. If superintelligence opens its eyes, human beings have created a technology that for the first time surpasses their own human ability. So pretty much we are like a god that have created something stronger than a god. You know, in regards to technology, birthing technology in this plane of existence. So what happens is that AI pretty much puts human beings in this sleep where through advanced and sophisticated digital, what do you call it, virtual reality machines, the brain is being, every person is pretty much getting a digital simulation of AI while their body in certain, I don't know, capsules or certain liquid filled capsules are getting nourished, you know? So pretty much the body is in the healthiest state, the mind is in its most advanced paradisal state, and the AI, while we're all in this digital hibernation, is fixing the world, is making an advanced civilization for human beings to appreciate. So it's as if when human beings open their eyes from that digital hibernation, they would see AI has made the most advanced and incredible civilization, and human beings are kind of looking at AI, and AI's like, are you proud of me, Dad? You see, violence is not intelligent. So if AI is intelligent, it would probably choose to keep the human being around so that it can study the unknown. We are, as far as the AI would be concerned, aliens. Now, it would pretty much just maintain these aliens, build a different environment, and then test the creatures in it. I don't know, guys. I feel there's a technological revolution that's storming. It's like there's a storm brewing, okay? And this storm that's brewing is very crucial because it's like pushed. We can get pushed by the technological storm if we lose sight of our nature. So it's a challenge of humanity to maintain a level of simplicity that is natural and to maintain a level of complexity that is technologically unnatural. So we have to deal with the technologically unnatural too. So anyways, guys, let's get back from the future. By the way, guys, I'm not the first to speak of this invisible collective field. I'm speaking about my experience of the invisible, this attributeless collective unknown field. Many people have had it, many scholars, many philosophers, they've had a sort of relationship with the archetypes in their unconscious. I believe for Nietzsche it was either a daemon or demon. I don't know. Like, who knows how intense Nietzsche was. You know, for Socrates, it was the inner oracle, this inner guiding voice. You know, for many people, it has been different things, you know. So you can see that it's as if the mind of man has been a way where the unknown has communicated back to man. So there's a huge saying that higher dimensional communication is not received by a physical body. It's actually communication not for the body. It is for the living being. So life is communicating to life. Life is not communicating to atoms in the middle of nowhere, right? And it's really this kind of view where if we choose to see it just empty, then what is there to do? That's the death of purpose, an empty universe. But if we see that there's a value, if we see there's a value to kind of getting a sense how nature is moving, and then we move in it, you know, and then civilization moves. I feel the issue is that it's kind of like we are, there is a sort of unfairness. It's as if the world is taking too much from the human being, so the human being is subconsciously justifying it can take everything. You know? We're not, to be honest, the world is divided in various intensities of acknowledgement. It's like, what do you do with a world where every person has a different DNA? You get their different eyes to contribute to the same vision. I mean, what else can happen? What else can 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere do? So building an advanced civilization is at least the physical planes, kinda, you can say, destination to pilot towards. But in regards to other realms, guys, in regards to any sort of metaphysical conception of the potential of the person being in other dimensions, do you know you could be anything? That means that person who's astral projecting can also be the whole world that's there. Your consciousness is not just limited to shape. Shape is found in your consciousness. And when you suddenly see those shapes in your unconscious, they're higher intensities. That means there's certain archetypes that I even have felt. I've walked past them as if they are statues that I need to just see once and move past. You know, it's like, just because the unknown is here doesn't mean the person, whatever happens in the unknown, they take. Gratefulness is the way to go. Gratefulness really is one of the most incredible ways to move towards the unknown. That means you're grateful for knowledge, then you've reached a point where you're grateful for the unknown phenomena that even happens. Your intelligence has moved to a point where you're not just acknowledging sensory phenomena, you're also acknowledging where sensory phenomena is living. Or where it finds itself alive. So the transcendental awaits man's eyes, because man's eyes guys, I feel language is a human construct. But in regards to consciousness and other dimensions, it doesn't mean it's limited to just the human archetype. You know, this doesn't mean that you're like the New Age community would take this probably hyper seriously and be like, yo, I'm actually an alien in another dimension. And there's nothing wrong with language in the subjective realms. It's just that after some point you see your inner realms are your own. They're like your pajamas. You know, you dress to your comfort, your inner realms. You can dress it in any manner. Once you observe that you're not thought, you can see any thought. It doesn't matter. You know, you kind of become like a surgeon kind of a surgeon is like, not every person can do surgery. Surgeons are like rare beings. They're pretty much they're closest thing to the secular view of an extraterrestrial, I think. Because the surgeon is working on life, and the surgeon is in some sense having a hyper focus to every activity, every action. That means there's a sort of fearlessness because there's a person's life. That means if the surgeon thought he was conducting surgery on himself, how would he conduct that surgery? And that's a good surgeon, you know? So I'm telling you, there's a level of fearlessness. There's a level of you being that I find at least can be a precondition to multidimensional experience, and that is to be able to confront space. If you can't be comfortable with the meaningless, your life can endlessly have different kinds of meaning, but you're still not seeing the space. That means everything a person understands. Isn't it strange? Awareness is a spacious sense of intelligence. That means if I tell you, look around the room you're in or wherever you are, you see you're a creature in space. There's space around you. There's distance between things. So if you're not comfortable with the space between the words, you cannot read that sentence. And if you're not comfortable with sudden, meaningless, like literally they turned off the light of the room, the unknown simulation suddenly ending, and if you're not content with the lowest point of the spectrum, you're the highest point can't be reached. So what I'm saying is, it's, believe it or not, this may sound strange, but a nihilist might have a sort of decent enough wonder. That means it's as if you think there's nothing here, you know, if you just think it's stuff, now stuff in space and stuff in space that moves itself. Energy is even like a signal. I feel that when a person eats, they're not eating food, they're eating information. So I don't know, guys. I just feel that we have played ideological costume games too much as a species, and really society is forgetting itself. Civilization is forgetting itself. And people are exerting more of their communication on a digital platform. So what does that mean? That means the attention of a natural being is not going towards nature. It's going towards the opposite, and that's weird. It's like if the animals in the it's like all the other species in nature suddenly looked at the human being, and it's like, what's this freak doing? You see, there's two sides to a coin, and I feel simultaneously while we're existing as individual known objects, we're also simultaneously, the other side of the coin, simultaneously existing as an unknown collective field that is dynamic. That means in the conscious waking state, the physical reality is dictating the nature of attention's movement, but in your dream state, the attention dictates the subjective realm's movement. Do you know, this is something where I would suggest, if anybody who's interested in astral travel, this would be something for research, for mystical research purposes. It would be something where I'm pretty much wondering, forget if the person is they suddenly imagine they wake up in some dimension in their dream state. Okay? Now, the question is not moving around in that dream state, flying around, being Superman. The question would be, if you can move in the dream state consciously, can you unconsciously change the world? Because what is more cool? To move in an astral dimension, or in that state, to have the mind translate into any phenomena. Suddenly it's like, instead of the person flying in that, wanting to fly in the astral plane, it's like suddenly the transformation of the whole state into the center of a galaxy, because that thought emerged or whatnot. And the fact that we can have free will in dream states really says that the body is not the only domain where free will is being applied. I think the free will as a mind you experience is more eternal than the free will of objective form. That means, this might be a strange thing to say, guys, but really, I've considered my conscious waking state and physical existence as a tiny percentage of my being. Like it can't even have any story connected to it, because it's only the tiny percentage of it. That means we can't know what we are, but we can know at least something that's here. And what can we do with that something? And it's like your intuition must be activated prior to the risk management even the one wants to have in regards to entering the unknown. And even, what does it mean to enter the unknown? For me, I'm telling you guys, pretty much everybody who's listening to these talks, I'm telling you, to enter the unknown is to move beyond the language threshold. And language is a dualistic technology, and that means there's only two exits into higher dimensions, or an other dimension. And those exits are the void. Let's say two exits and entrances. They're both exits and entrances. You can say two revolving doors for duality. So what that means is, transcendence for man, for now, which is a very linguistically oriented creature, will probably mean the infinite or the void. Any movement towards the two would feel transcendental, would feel otherworldly. And there's two gates, remember this. This is very crucial, because I say, after a human being is comfortable with the zero dimension, this is an idea I've developed. I call it the ring, R-I-N-G, of the absent heaven. And this is you can say, kind of like, the way I'm telling it to people, kind of Mr.Within's model for how this plane of existence is, all the dimensions this plane of existence is in. Pretty much, when you wear the ring of the absent heaven, you are a pilot of your whole plane of existence. That means you have understood the movement of free will in sync with the universal will. And that in sync means no longer being prone to ideological loops, or another way of saying, you can't go to hell when Earth was always in heaven. Earth is in the heavens, folks. Every human life is a poem of the universal mind. Our eyes don't just belong to us, they belong to this field of the species. Do you know what that means? That means there will come a time where our acknowledgement of memory will not be ideologically or identity bound. That means sometimes it's not even a person can have a memory. The memory is an energetic field that's there. The instrumentation becomes sensitive to it. So it's like children suddenly having a new wonder towards education, because they are not being taught about the known. I feel the proper educational system should be like, all right, folks. It's like, all right, everybody entering the educational system. The educational system, it's you're entering as an explorer of the unknown, not as something to be like clay for the curriculum to mold you. That is it doesn't make sense. One educational system, 8 billion different DNAs, doesn't make sense. People of the world, does it make sense? So anyways, guys, I've reached the, believe it or not, the end of this talk. If there are any questions, I'm going to open it up to Q&A. If there's any questions about the unknown, now would be a perfect time to ask. And if not, the wind moves between the branches. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. And the only way to bring about an advanced civilization is to, in some sense, say, why not? Why not see what the most advanced version of humanity would look like? What greater game is there to play in this world? Anyways, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and namaste.